Hi guys, what's up? Welcome to the channel, my name's Jared. Today I'm going to be doing a suspension overhaul on the V35 Skyline. I've gone and spent quite a bit of money on this video today, and we're going to be changing the suspension to coilover with true coilovers in the rear, and we're also going to put some adjustable arms in the car to dial in the wheel alignment now that the car's going to be slightly lower. Starting off, I've gone and purchased some BC Racing coilovers. I got these from Just Jap in Sydney, and these are the DS series. These are the step up from the BRs, which are more targeted towards street use. I heard Adam LZ say that these ones with the digressive dampers, they're actually more comfortable to drive. So at different speeds you're going to get different amounts of firmness from the shocks. This is the front, and then this is the rear setup, and then on the rear we've got these extension knobs to take it into the cabin. For the arms I've gone GKTech, and these are their front upper control arms, front upper camber arms, and they come with dust boots and lock nuts, and these ones you're able to actually adjust the camber on the car using this Allen bolt here. And then on the rear, also GKTech, I've gone their rear camber arms, and when you go true coilover in the rear, you also need to replace the bucket with the spring with these rear toe arms. As you can see, I've already gone ahead and actually removed the wheels off the car and got them on jack stands, so we can get straight to working on the front. So I gone ahead and finished the other side. This was actually a bit harder than the other side just because the sway bar was fighting me. It was loaded up because one side was long, this side, and the other side was short. So in retrospect, what I would do is disassemble both sides completely and then install them both at the same time. Now we're gonna move on to the rears, which doesn't look too bad. We got a bolt at the bottom and then 2 bolts at the top. And then we're gonna take this spring out and the whole arm. And we're also gonna change the camber arm on the bottom there. I didn't order the traction arm just because they are a bit complicated to set up, and I think for what I want to do initially, just camber and the rear toe adjustment is going to be enough for me. I just wanted to film how I got this remote shock adjuster in to connect it to the coilover. So I went ahead and I removed the interior trim up the top so I can pull down here, and you'll see there's a wire and then next to it another hole, and you can see the other end of the coilover adjuster here. So with this piece you can actually disassemble it. So it comes with this Allen key here, and what you can do is to start with back that off and remove the knob off, and then next you can remove the sleeve. So you've got the sleeve and the part that attaches to the coilover. So what I did first was, this is big enough to actually fit through that hole. So from inside the trunk I pushed it in down, and then I went under the wheel well once I saw it, and I put that back through into the trunk. So now it's just sitting like that, and then I went into the trunk and then put that back on and tightened it up and locked it in place. So now it can't go either way. And then just inside the wheel well, then you can put this on top of the coilover and tighten it up. Alright guys, it's the next day. I installed everything yesterday, which you just seen. It took a lot longer than I anticipated actually. With the front suspension, the sway bar issue, like I mentioned before, took a lot of time to sort it out, and you have to disassemble a lot on these cars to actually get that strut out. It's not like S13s where you just have McPherson strut and it's just literally 2 bolts down the bottom, 3 at the top, and that's it. And the rear, as you saw, that lower camber, the lower camber arm, the bolt not being able to come out and having to drop the sway bar down, that also took up a lot of time as well. But I've got everything in now and it's just loose. So the next step from here, now that everything's in, is you want to chuck the wheels on and just see roughly how it's going to sit for height. And the first thing we're going to adjust is the height of the car, because that's going to dictate the rest of the wheel alignment. So I like to just set the height of the car and then see sort of how the camber's sitting as well, and set the camber, whether it be for aesthetic purposes or roughly to where I think it's going to be for the wheel alignment. So what I've done is place some wood block or timber blocks under each wheel. This is just going to lift the car off the ground a bit. So between jacking and lowering the car, it's easier to fit the jack underneath the car. Back doesn't look too bad, but the front is like tucking heaps and got way too much camber. It's actually so low that I can't get the jack out the other side even with the timber underneath. I think I'm going to start off with raising the front probably 20 mil and just wind out some camber just to see what the fitment is like under the guard. With the front camber arms for the GKTech, before I actually take this wheel off, I'm just going to roughly set where I want the camber to fit inside the guard so I can judge for the height. And they've conveniently added these Allen head adjusters. They're 12 mil, so I actually had to go and buy that 12 mil Allen socket hex to adjust these. So I'm just going to adjust it per my liking, just so it's sort of slightly flush on the guard and practical. Because there's a front and a back adjustment, whatever you turn one side, you need to do the other, just so you don't bind up the control arm. So for the height, we're first going to unlock this bottom stop here. So now we got 20 mil. Now we'll just wind that back down. 20 mil actually raised the car a bit more than 20 mil, I think. It looks very similar to how it was before we put the coilovers on. And this rear looks like identical to how it was before. So I'm just gonna do this front as well, 20 mil to try and match the other side. And I'm just going to repeat the same process you saw on the other side. So now done the passenger side, and it looks pretty similar now to the driver's side. And this rear driver's side, still the same gap, 2 fingers. And this one for some reason is tucking tire. So I'm going to just jack this side up and raise it 10 mil to try and match the other side. The next thing I'm going to do, just to make sure that we're symmetrical left to right, is using a tape measure from the ground to the guard, and here we can see we're just under 75 centimeters, and here we're also just under 75 centimeters. So I can say at least for the height adjustment left and right we're the same here. The front I'm still not super happy with. I've got a bit more gap there than on the rear. If I can match what I've got on the rear, which is about two of my fingers. So we're probably 3 fingers at the moment, so I reckon maybe 10 mil. Come back up 10 mil, 20 mil was too much. And I still think we might have a bit too much camber in the front. To rough the camber out left and right, I've bought one of these digital angle level measures. You can just stick it on the inside of the brake disc just to get an idea of where the camber at full extension is going to be. When you drop the car, it's going to camber in about another half a degree. So whatever you set it at full droop like this, it's probably going to gain another half a degree or so. So depending on what we want to set, at the moment you can see it's reading 85.7. So that means we've got 4.3 degrees of negative camber on the front, which is a bit spicy for a street car. If you're going to the track, maybe 4.3 degrees is alright. But I think for a car that's my daily driver, I don't want to be wearing tyres out too quickly on the inner edge. So I'm just going to set it initially to 2 degrees. So what I'll be looking for is 88 degrees on here. So as we can see, as we camber it out, going to get somewhere like here. And then that way we can match that to the other side, at least initially, and see how the camber looks. Now you can see we're at 88 degrees. For your reference, you can see we've actually got quite a bit of adjustment out. It's about halfway down the body here. So this kit is definitely designed to run a lot of negative camber. Alright, so this is the final look that I'm going for. So we got the 2 fingers of clearance on the guard, and I've got the camber pretty much set how I wanted it. I did have to go a little bit lower than the last clip, so I think there might be a bit more negative camber than before. But it's important at this stage that we now replicate the settings from this side to the other to make them symmetrical, because the last thing you want is to have more camber on one side than the other, or a different height than the other, because that's obviously going to affect how it drives. So I'll show you how to take the measurements so we can replicate from the other side. So first off, you obviously want to measure the degrees of angle you've got on this side to replicate it on the other. The other thing to make sure you're safe is that your adjustment left and right is symmetrical. So if you get one of these small 15cm rulers, you can actually fit it inside the end of the adjustment there, and you want to make sure the millimeters to the edge here are the same, left and right. With having the 2 adjustments, having one more than the other is going to affect your caster and also your toe as well. Also, if you have one adjusted way too far out, it's going to take more load than the other on its threads. And remember, once you're happy with that, you want to go and lock down the locking collar on both sides of those. The next thing we need to measure is the distance between the 2 collars, so we can set the height the same on both sides. The last thing you'll want to check is the height from the top hat to the top locking collar. That is going to make sure that we've got the same preload on the spring left and right. So now we can go ahead and put the wheel back on here and go to the other side and do the same setup. So I've got the rear now set up to the height that I want, and I got the 2 finger gap at the top here, and I set the camber to -1 degree in the back. It's a bit, since we changed the rear toe arm, I've had to toe it in just by eye to start with. When you're doing the rear, I would suggest you just put more toe in the rear. It's just going to make it a little bit more stable until you get your alignment. So just use the side of the car as reference and toe it in. You will notice that when you change the toe, it will change the camber, so you might have to go backwards and forwards a couple times. So once again, take the wheel off, take those same measurements, and also measure the length of the toe and the camber arm so we can set it up the same on the other side. I just wrote down the settings and measurements from my car in case you want to use these as a starting point. So for the front here, I've set the camber to 87.5, and that is measuring 26 millimeters either side of the GKTech upper camber arms. I set the coilover height between the two lock nuts to 60 mil, and the spring preload is set to 202 mils from the top hat. The rear, I set the height between the two locking nuts 97 mil. The springs preloaded to 200 mil. The camber is set to 89 degrees or -1 degrees camber. And the camber and caster arm worked out to be 10 mil adjustment from the nut to the actual flange where the bolt bolts onto the knuckle. Since where I work is very dirty and dusty, as you can see inside the car, I went ahead and bought these coilover covers. These were from the UK. They're a universal cover, and they come in a variety of different lengths which you can purchase, and they essentially go around the outside of the coilover like you can see in the picture here, and they prevent dust and debris and rust from occurring on the threads of your coilover, so next time you want to adjust it, it's not dirty. So now everything's back together, we're ready to go for a test drive. The last thing we want to set is actually the dampers. So what I like to do starting out is just measure how many clicks there are, and for these there's 32 clicks front and rear. So what I like to do then is set it on number 16, just in the middle. From that, then we can gauge whether we need to go softer or harder, but it's a good starting point just in the middle. So we're just going for a drive now just to see how it feels and make sure nothing's loose or clunking. It's definitely stiffer, just that immediate first 10-20 meters. I feel lower as well in the car, which is good. I felt like really high up before, even just lowering the car a little bit. Good news is low speed still feels quite comfortable. Just gonna go back and check that dust shield for the brakes first. It's weird, it makes some funny noise. Something touching on that side. Alright guys, so I came back from the drive and I took the wheel off and I found where the noise was coming on that side. You can see just up the top there, the top of the new upper control arm is actually hitting up there. So what I did was just hammered up that section out a bit to make a bit more clearance, and I cut the plastic guard a little bit shorter as well. Alright, let's try for round 2. No brake disc rubbing. It doesn't feel like the upper control arms are hitting anything. Just the exhaust is already out of the box. I'm really surprised with how comfortable they feel. I thought they were going to be much stiffer. You can definitely tell when you hit a big bump that it is working quite hard and there's a big thud. But actually driving normally over a regular bumpy road, it's actually not that different. So I'm going to do a bit of a faster section up here. Not thrashing on the car just because we're still feeling out the suspension to make sure nothing's loose. and I can tell now the front definitely has a bit of toe out. This bit's really bumpy here. Wow. I'm really impressed. It's way better than, I know it's not a good comparison, but the Tames on the Civic there, oh my god. Definitely some understeer. I think it's going to need a bit more camber in the front. So it seems like the low speed comfort is really good, but as soon as you hit a big bump, you can definitely tell that it's sprung a lot harder. It doesn't have the soft shock that the originals have. There's a big bump here. Not rubbing. I'm just going to get out and play with the shock settings, and I'm going to put them a little bit softer. So I'm at 16 front and rear, so I'm going to try setting 8 and just see how that performs as well. It feels very similar now to the stock suspension. Alright guys, that wraps up another video. I'm really stoked with how these BC coilovers feel. I have to say, in all honesty, I think these BCs are the most comfortable coilover I've ever ridden in or owned. I highly recommend them, and for the price, they're not that expensive as well. I am a bit surprised with those GKTech front upper camber arms that they did hit inside the guard, but I am only running -2 degrees camber in the front, and after driving it I feel like I probably could go to -3 because it feels like it's washing out quite a bit in the front still. And definitely I can tell that there's more toe out now that we've lowered the car a bit. I think the front looks pretty much exactly how I want it to look, and it's still functional. And the back I think is still maybe slightly a little bit too high. I might drop it another 5 mil. Stay tuned for the next episode where we'll actually wheel align the car, and I'll show you how I do that at home. Alright, thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you in the next video.